Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Jeremy Allaire, who is the co-founder and CEO of Circle. Nice to see you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
This is your 8th Davos, you said.
I think so, yes.
So let's start with how the conversations and the tone has changed in the time you've been here.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? I started coming in the late 2009, 2010 kind of time frame. And I think as you went into like the mid to late teens of the World Economic Forum, there was a period of time as maybe peak globalization, and so much of the focus, Klaus had organized around this idea of, we're entering the fourth industrial revolution, and there's all of these, very significant kind of
the world being more connected than ever.
More connected, and these rapid advancements of technology, and that would kind of fuel this next phase of improving the state of the world. And I think sort of all of us saw, both because of the acknowledgement of the climate crisis, but also because of political instability, nationalism, balkanization, all these things post 2016. Really, even starting before that with Brexit, you really saw the nature of the focus shift. And so obviously then we went into pandemic crisis, and it was dealing with all of the aftermath of the pandemic crisis. And so here we are, I think this week, and while there is some focus on fundamental technology breakthroughs like AI, like you said, you can't miss an AI panel, or every enterprise company is now an AI company kind of thing. But I think there's the kind of optimism around how can industry and the public sector be driving significant technological change and societal change that comes from that. There isn't as much of that as there was during an earlier period, and it reflects the political and economic reality of the world in many respects. But as I was saying, as a technology entrepreneur that is very focused on the way internet technology in particular can improve the world, I certainly would love to see more dialogue that's forward-looking in that way.
Well, what's interesting, and I take your point, what's interesting is a lot of the conversation here is about what's happening with the rise of populism and this distrust of technology. A lot of it is around AI, but you're in stablecoin, the crypto space. Talk about how the conversation there has changed, because certainly in the US, we're paying attention to Bitcoin. Again, I think there's a lot of confusion about what's happening on the regulatory front. What are the conversations you're having?
Well, it's been a significant evolution. I think there's a lot of noise during the huge kind of bull market, as it were, previously, and now there's a lot more signal, which is the companies that focused on building trusted, transparent, and compliant offerings are the ones that have survived and in fact are thriving. A huge difference is, in fact, in many parts of the world, in fact, almost every major financial market center has either enacted or will enact comprehensive regulation of this market, and especially the stablecoin market. And so it's really shifting, and it's shifting towards, this is here, it's here to stay, it's being integrated into the traditional financial system. Even the Bitcoin ETF, which is, yes, it's about people who want to invest and trade in that particular digital commodity, but it's also about major regulated traditional financial players integrating into this ecosystem. And so there is a real shift, an understanding that this is lasting, and I think that's creating more curiosity around, okay, I need to double take on this technology. I need to really understand where are the applications happening and what is driving it. And for us, that's exciting, because without any doubt, the killer app of blockchain technology is stablecoins, which brings the power of dollars everywhere.
Remind people of the benefits of stablecoin for those who don't know.
Yeah, the basic idea is that you can take traditional fiat money, like dollars, and you can essentially connect it to blockchains and issue digital currency versions of those dollars. And unlike traditional electronic money, these digital currency dollars get the power of the internet. They have the ability to be transacted and transmitted at the speed of the internet with the cost efficiency essentially of just sending data, and to do that globally, and to do that in a way which is open and accessible to anyone with a device connected to the internet. And so really what the internet has done for information exchange, for media, for communications, stablecoins do for traditional money, and bring the power of open internet infrastructure to traditional money. Kind of, we like to call it open money. And so that's what stablecoins really bring. In particular, stablecoins like USDC, which have been designed around, kind of a reserve model, a transparency model, and a regulation model around them that allows the holders and users to know that these are in fact, fully backed digital dollars.
Talk a little bit, are regulators getting it right? What are you seeing on the regulatory front? Because there's still, are you often lumped in with crypto, first of all, unfairly, and secondly, when you look at the regulation happening in the US, especially relative to the rest of the world, how are we doing in making it competitive and safe?
Well, I think broadly in the major governments in the world, in the markets that are the largest kind of financial markets and trade markets, we're seeing really positive developments overall. So you're seeing really the twin pillars of regulation are, if you're going to be a kind of intermediary, a financial intermediary that deals with digital assets, whatever kind of digital asset, you need to, be properly registered, audited, have the right security, the right anti-money laundering, the right controls, like, fundamental things to be a financial institution. So it's defining that, and that's now getting broadly put in place, which is very important. The second is specific to stablecoins. And interestingly there, 2024 is the year of stablecoins from a regulatory perspective. Already have laws that are going in effect for the entire 800 million people in the Eurozone. We have laws in effect in Japan. We have laws that are going to go in effect in Singapore, Hong Kong, the UAE, the UK, and then advanced legislation in the United States. And broadly, those regulatory frameworks in many respects reflect the operating model that Circle has been under now with this business for over half a decade. And so I think this is good regulation overall. There's some differences between them, and so that creates its own set of challenges, kind of normalization, standardization, that kind of thing. But very significant, solid foot forward. And I think the outcome of that is at the end of this year, society and corporations and others will know these digital dollars or digital euros that are issued under these kinds of stablecoin laws will be integrated part of the global financial system, and that's a huge evolution from where we've been.
There's been a lot of discussion about the fate of the US dollar, especially as you've seen countries like China, India, Russia start to basically, denominate some of their debt away from the US dollar. What are you seeing, and what do you think? I know you're not necessarily, in the maw of that world, but dollarization is something that very much impacts your business.
Definitely, and I like to call it digital dollarization, which is actually a phenomenon that we're seeing happen right now. In our new, State of the USDC Economy report for 2024, when we look at what's happening with USDC around the world, we are seeing demand for digital dollars in emerging markets all around the world, where individuals, households, and small and medium businesses want to hold dollar stablecoins and transact in dollar stablecoins instead of their local currencies or instead of their local banking systems. And that reflects, one, that dollars are still what people want, even if their governments might be saying something else from a political strategic perspective. On the ground, people want dollars. And then secondly, I think what's really interesting about it is it really brings light to this issue that the currency competition is increasingly a technology competition. And so a lot of times people think of currency competition as having to do with, your ability to pay debts or your monetary policy. Well, it's also about your technology strategy and what you're doing to kind of give your currency internet superpowers. And so this technology competition around currency is a very real thing. And that's a message that we certainly have brought to Washington, which is to say, if there's going to be a digital currency space race and the United States wants to win, it needs to enact legislation that empowers regulated financial industry participants to issue and operate and run this kind of digital dollar infrastructure. And that's the best thing that the United States can do to accelerate its currency competition in this new era of internet-based financial systems.
Can we unpack that a little bit? Because I think about China as often being a major competitor of the US. I don't know a lot about what's happening on the regulatory front there in terms of what you're talking about. Where do they rank relative to us in that respect of actually creating a vibrant, digital infrastructure?
Well, China as a whole has invested massively in building a vibrant digital infrastructure, both in the public sector and the private sector.
But for yuan denominated coin?
So today, you really have digital money in China is dominated by the private sector. Mm-hmm. So Alipay, WeChat Pay, these are the dominant kind of mediums of exchange. And the government has put forward a government-run digital yuan as kind of a third way. And in some ways, it's kind of a feeling like we have to make this available because we don't want the only thing that's available to be these private sector forms of digital money. Now, that has had limited uptake. We'll see how that evolves. But my belief is that the Chinese government is not going to be the first to move on this. They may be the last to move on this. And so I would expect that they're very closely watching all of these other major countries that are making stablecoin laws that are enabling the private sector to kind of issue and operate using blockchain technology. And I think that ultimately they will lean in hard on this. And they have some extraordinary companies that could compete in this space. So I think that they're certainly my estimation is that they're watching very closely, and in fact, they have some very major efforts around blockchain technology. So government-backed efforts around blockchain infrastructure across all forms of industry, in cross-border, in the Belt and Road, and so blockchain technology is a strategic imperative for them, and that is a weakness for the United States. It has not become a strategic imperative for the United States government, and the United States government needs to respond to that. It is a national competitiveness, national security, and national economic question.
Anytime you say the word national and policy together, it rarely goes with the US. So how optimistic are you that we will get our house in order in that front?
I remain optimistic because the United States plays such a pivotal and central role in the global financial system. And if there's going to be a major new technology innovation in the global financial system, the United States will come in and have its role. I think similar to China, it doesn't need to be first. It doesn't need to be last. And so I think as these standards have emerged, and the US, by the way, through the US Treasury Department and the Financial Stability Board, has absolutely been pushing for comprehensive regulatory frameworks. And so at a government strategic level, they've been pushing for it. How we enact laws, the difference between the administration and agencies and Congress and the courts, and there's a lot of unique sausage making in the US policy apparatus. And so we're going through that now. This has become a bipartisan issue. This has become an issue which many stakeholders, from financial technology innovators like Circle to the biggest banks and asset managers in the world, and the biggest payment companies, we all have a stake in this. And so I think it's moving along. I'm optimistic specifically around stablecoins that we're going to see payment stablecoin laws passed in the United States because I think it's too challenging for the United States to not do that.
So can we step back a second, Jeremy? The political climate right now with regard to, well, you mentioned bipartisan, just there's almost sometimes there's a weaponization of innovation, and there has not been a lot of coordination. How is that impacting you? Talk a little bit about the political environment and the degree to which, what advice you would have for those policymakers, given where we are right now.
Well, I think there are topics which are just nonpartisan topics. And I didn't say bipartisan, I said nonpartisan, right? They're not about what your political affiliation is. They're just facts on the ground, right? The emergence of generative AI is an example of this is something it's a nonpartisan issue. Now, there may be partisanship in terms of heavy regulation, not heavy regulation, et cetera.
Fear versus FOMO. I think it's quite a political issue, actually.
For sure. But what I find is in these is it is not really what your political party is.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing an incredible number of very innovation focused Democrats that are very focused, for example, on the digital asset industry. And you're seeing also, I think very pro markets, pro competition, pro US competitiveness Republicans very focused on that issue. You're seeing national security hawks on both sides who are coming at this and saying, hey, we got to deal with, kind of the illicit finance uses of this. And so that's what I mean in the sense that there are kind of pockets of interest that don't have to do specifically with your party affiliation. They have to do with your point of view about what's important for the United States. And so that's where I see more and more of that happening. And I think you'll see that as we go through this electoral cycle as well. I think you're going to see lots of candidates on both sides of the political landscape who are kind of stepping in and having a strong point of view about this and wanting to be proactive about making sure that the U.S. doesn't lose its leadership position.
Does it matter the outcome of the U.S. election?
I personally believe the U.S. election has extraordinary implications, for the world. I think there's a lot on the line in terms of the ultimate position of the U.S. and how our allies view us and how our economic partners view us. And so I think there's a lot at stake.
I mean, I know it's, these things are personal, but what are the consequences that are being talked about here? I don't know if people have asked you about it as a, U.S. Silicon Valley, technology entrepreneur. What are some of the issues we should be focused on as we head into what's an important year, as you mentioned, and also an electoral year?
Well, I think in the United States, there are these, big issues on the economy. There's big issues around the border. I think there's big issues around some of these major technology changes, what's happening in the labor force. Obviously a very large issue that's on everyone's minds is the affordability of the U.S. Government debt.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all, key issues that people are focused in on. I think, I'm not having a lot of U.S. domestic political conversations here, but I think, I think a general theme is I think for many of the participants here, there's really a strong desire to kind of move outside of the severe partisanship that we've seen, and I think be in a place where the U.S. can speak with one voice and face the world in a unified way, given the complexity of what faces the whole world and what faces the United States.
Are you optimistic that's likely to happen?
It's very early in this electoral cycle, so I think it's completely unknown what could happen.
I just want to step back to, I've lived in Asia, I've lived in Africa, and I know that the way people trade currency is very much reflective of their level of trust in government, right? Sometimes they trade money in the street. Obviously, we're in a different world now. What are you seeing, since you also get some insight into terms of how people are, in essence, sort of exchanging money? Are you seeing any interesting trends that you think are emblematic of that level of trust or lack of trust? You mentioned it a little earlier.
There's not a lot of big surprises there. I think in markets and in countries where there's significant currency devaluation, you see a particular behavior. I think in markets where There's significant capital controls. You see certain behaviors, and those are not surprising. But you're also seeing, I think, interestingly, in markets that have significant amounts of cross-border, internet-driven commerce behavior, or where the labor market participants are more remote and distributed internationally. I think what's interesting is we're seeing more firms and more households, as it were, that are trying to adopt these new technologies like stablecoins. It's not because they're trying to flee their currency or this or that, is that they've actually determined this is just a better way to operate. It's sort of like when people realize, like, God, I can do a FaceTime call instead of paying the phone company however much, right?
Why wouldn't you?
So I think that people are kind of seeing, like, wow, this is just a better utility. So I'm just going to start adopting it. And it's not the General Motors of the world that are choosing to do that first. It's sort of the individuals and the small and medium enterprises that have more degrees of freedom, can move faster. They're starting to do that, and that's really exciting to see.
One other question, which is getting back to sort of your roots. There's a lot of discussion here around trust, and I was seeing the Edelman Trust Barometer, and one of the things that's interesting is, in some ways, the weaponization of innovation, and how Republicans in particular don't trust that innovation is working in their favor. I don't know if you see that, or if you feel that there is a risk that politics is starting to get into the realm of what in essence should be just a growth engine, what you're doing and what others are doing.
Well, I think people care about their purchasing power. Is it up? Is it down? They care about whether they're maintaining sustainable jobs. Are those jobs, are they seeing wage growth in the face of inflation? I think people care about the stability and benefits and other things. So there's a lot that kind of households are tuned into, and so it's very easy to sort of say, hey, there's something happened technologically, or something happened where that changed the mix on that, and it's very easy to blame the technology there. But I think that, rather than a failure of technology, in fact, those are often examples of policy failures, of anticipating and adapting to that. I think we're facing a pretty massive inflection point on that with AI, which I personally believe has the potential to mass displace a huge number of professionals. We're not talking about people who work in manufacturing. Professionals at an extraordinary scale, but it also has an extraordinary potential to empower professionals to take on and do things that were inconceivable to them in the past. And so that's obviously incumbent on the private sector, I think, first and foremost, to navigate. But that also should be as a kind of framed as a backdrop of public policy objectives.
Yeah, and communicate too, right? Because you get lumped in the same bucket, to your point. I mean, you're talking about a lot of nuance that doesn't always come out in terms of the discussions of how this plays out. Yeah. Is there anything else on your radar you want to put on ours, from here or otherwise?
I think I like to believe, and I think I see, despite all of the complexity and turmoil, I actually think there are a lot of tremendous green shoots in terms of the global economy. I think there's a lot of interesting green shoots in terms of breakthroughs in carbon reduction, in energy technology. There's obviously, I think, some very significant breakthroughs in the development of this new internet financial system, the application of AI. So I see a lot of green shoots, and I think it's up for grabs, sort of conceptually, whether 5 to 10 years from now we're in a kind of renaissance of kind of global dynamism, or as some would say, we've descended into chaos. I'm certainly more on the former than the latter.
That's right. Here's to a renaissance as opposed to chaos. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.